Hi and welcome to the Influencer Marketing Hub. Today I'm joined by Vivien Garnes from Upfluence and we're going to be talking all things influencer marketing. Vivien, would you just start off by telling us what Upfluence is and what it does?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Ed. So, Upfluence is an influencer marketing technology company. And what we do in a nutshell is that we help businesses and we help agencies scale their influencer marketing efforts.
Brilliant. That's great. So, how can brands integrate their current influencer campaigns with other marketing channels?
Yeah, great question. So, essentially, the way I see marketing, especially in the digital age, is that it's something that's very multifaceted, right? It has a lot of different components to it. And there's this idea in influencer marketing that I feel very passionate about, which is the idea of inbound influencer marketing, right? Historically, what brands have done is that they've reached out to influencers, in an outbound fashion, right? They reached out to influencers that did not necessarily know who they were, depending on the prestige of the brand, and they activated them as a result. But what we've seen with our clients being extremely successful is the idea of identifying influencers that already gravitate around a certain brand. Influencers who are already your clients, influencers who are subscribed to your email newsletter, or who follow you on social media, or your traffic that you just captured, and so on and so forth. And it's actually a great way to stretch your marketing dollars and to really have an omni-channel approach to influencer marketing. And what that creates essentially is that it's very virtuous cycle. It's very positive, a snowball effect to a degree, in the sense that the more successful your influencer marketing efforts, your marketing efforts, are in general, the more traffic you generate, the more followers you have on Instagram, the more clients that you acquire, the more potential to identify new influencers you have, right? So I would say that's the first side. The other side is obviously to repurpose the content that influencers do create, right? Influencers are known to create great content very creatively. And if you do negotiate the right to reuse it, you can then repurpose it for your paid media campaigns, for amplification campaigns, your content marketing efforts, your social ads, and so on and so forth. And you had a great level of social proof to whatever you're doing in marketing in general, right? So I would say those two things.
Nice one. So, how can brands better leverage influencer marketing platforms like Upfluence?
Yeah. So another great question. So influencer marketing is very time consuming in general, right? And this is why most brands come to platforms like Upfluence to very much scale their efforts and to have productivity gains. But it still takes time. You have to put in the effort to create relationships with influencers, to nurture them, and to really have the output that you want. But there are, in my mind, several smart ways for brands really to make the most of their influencer marketing platforms. And the first one would be to integrate with your company or your agency's core systems, right? So usually have some data sources, right? You have a CRM or CMS where your clients live. You might have an email marketing software where you have all your subscribers and so on and so forth. And by integrating this with your influencer marketing platforms, you're basically able to streamline the data sourcing and to automate part of the influencer marketing process. Essentially, you're making influencer marketing passive to a degree, right? And that's a really great way to increase output or to reduce input. If you can allocate less man hours to your influencer marketing efforts as a result, or in the best of both worlds, you can do both. So yeah, that would be idea number one. The idea number two would be to expand or to take more risks, probably. What I mean by that is most of our clients and most people who do influencer marketing, they usually have one strategy that scales really well. So they only do Instagram for, let's say, macro influencers and for affiliate campaign because that's what worked in the past, right? What really I would suggest is to leverage their influencer marketing technology platform to try and experiment with new things. Maybe try Pinterest or Twitch or TikTok or whatever it is that you've never tried. And you can start small scale. Don't allocate a ton of time or a ton of budget to it, but prove your unit economics as time goes on, and really then have several legs to stand on in a nutshell, right? And probably the last one is historically the industry has really struggled to prove ROI for influencer marketing campaigns, and we've had a lot of success in the recent past with affiliate campaigns, right? By basically offering influencers a certain coupon code, you can really attribute the conversions that you have to a certain coupon code, and that's a great way to prove ROI and to really attach a certain ROI to a certain influencer, and so you can scale your programs as a result. So yeah, those are three ideas that I would give to any brands who want to better leverage whatever influencer marketing program you're using.
I like the idea of reaching out and trying new platforms. Is there any platform that you think surprises people more than often when they do try it that maybe isn't as well known?
I'd say it's different for anyone, but in general, any newer platform tends to be less populated by advertisers and more populated by influencers. So there's always a time when there's a little bit of a gold rush, where there's a lot of audience, there's a lot of eyeballs that are fresh and quite unpolluted by brands, and so that's when the brands basically have the best possible bargaining power, in the sense that if they reach out to influencers are not that much solicited by other brands, and they can get fantastic deals and fantastic value out of it. That's still very true for TikTok, for example. I know it's the hype, everybody talks about TikTok, so it's not exactly a new thing, but there's still this very good arbitrage that brands can do in that sense. But sometimes it's actually good to look back. There are platforms that we take for granted, platforms like Twitch or Pinterest or blogs even, right? And nobody talks about blogs anymore. And sometimes you can have fantastic ROI by going for places that are a little bit less crowded, because as a brand you stand out more in the inbox of influencers that are less solicited, and that's when you can have fantastic ROI as well.
Yeah, I think people often get distracted, don't they, by the new shiny object that's the new platform that everyone's saying they need to be on. So there's a lot of influencers out there. How do brands go about finding influencers that are in line with their brand and their values?
Mm-hmm. So to me, there are two methods. I'm going to sound like a broken record a little bit, but I'm going to get back to one of my first answers. But historically, there's been the outbound way, right? Me, brand, I will reach out to you, influencer. You may or may not know who I am. If I'm Coca-Cola, you might, but if I'm a lesser known brand, you might not. And then in that case, I have to make sure that my marketing persona is your audience, essentially, right? That's the number one thing that you need to make sure to have right brand image and value alignment. And when you look into the academic literature, there's this idea of editorial congruence, meaning the best possible performance between a brand and an influencer is if, of course, the editorial line of the brand matches the editorial appetite for the audience of that influencer, right? And if there's a continuity, that's when it's going to perform best. But also, I would really advise brands to look very deep into the data, right? There's a number of things that might look good very much on the surface when you look at the vanity metrics, but when you take a deeper dive, that doesn't necessarily hold true, right? For example, you need to watch out for, the fraud, the fake followers. That's a big issue in the industry right now. But also, what's the actual usable audience as opposed to the total audience? Because someone with 100,000 followers might have 25% of fake followers. Then if your product is targeting women, their audience might be 50% men. If you only are able to sell in the United States, maybe another 50% of the audience is in the UK, and so on and so forth. So when you make, the math and you remove all these percentage points, one step after the other, you might end up to a usable audience that's actually a 10th, 20th of the total audience. And that's something really to look into. And the last thing is obviously to do with brand safety. As a brand, you want to associate yourself with an influencer that you're comfortable with, so that doesn't, do hate speech or nudity or anything you wouldn't like to associate your brand with. Right?
You'd hope those things would be obvious.
yeah. Well, sometimes people who really look for scale, they tend to overlook a little bit the obvious, and that's when bad things happen usually. So there's a fine line to walk, and you have to be able to navigate those two things.
So when you've found an influencer that you like the look of, or that you think ticks all the right boxes and doesn't have fake followers and so on, how do you go about building a relationship with them, reaching out to them?
Yeah, so the way the industry functions right now, it's usually to reach out to the influencers, mostly over email, sometimes over DM. There's a variety of ways. And here there's a couple of tactical things that need to be done. Number one is we are lucky enough to have thousands of clients and to arbitrate tens of thousands of influencer relationships every month. So we have a lot of data on this. And what we've seen is that the more personalized the email outreach that you do to one or many influencers, the better. So it's always good, to use the name of influencer, of course, but to prove that you've done your homework to a degree, even if it's just, mentioning the name of the blog or a latest post or a brand they worked with, or, something that as an influencer, as a recipient of the email, makes me think, okay, that brand actually took an interest in who I am as an influencer. That isn't exactly surprising, right? A little flattery can go a long way for that. So that's finding number one. Finding number two is sometimes to reach out to influencers at off-peak times. a lot of influencers are very solicited. They receive tens or if not hundreds of solicitations every week, mostly 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. So actually, solicitations on a Saturday morning, for example, can be surprisingly effective, and the open rates and the reply rates can be a lot higher, right? So be very personalized, customized as much as you humanly can, and as much as your marketing man hours allow you to be. And number two, in trying to be off peak and not too predictable in the way you do it. But whatever you do, stay very genuine, stay true to yourself and to your brand. And it's a human to human relationship building exercise, right? So it has to be genuine.
Yeah, the funny thing is about 90% of the outreach emails I think I've ever seen have been mass produced, not very personal at all. Why is it that the message doesn't seem to be getting out to people responsible for influencer marketing to actually spend the time on the research on doing this? Surely they'll get a significantly better result.
I think it's an arbitrage that people make, right? It's an equation with a couple of variables, one of which is how many people do I reach out to and what's my conversion rate, essentially. And you sort of can get away with murder if one is really good, even if the other one is not too good, right? So some people say, well, if it takes me an hour to personalize an email and that only doubles my conversion rate, why would I? So it's really personal to each brand and to each agency. But that being said, there is the best of both worlds in my mind. There is a scenario in which you can give a very good impression of sincerity and personalization in an email by automating part of the merge field collection, so you can have actually an email that's very credible, even though it's a mail merge and it's sent to a larger audience, right? So you have to find the right middle ground for your brand and whatever works best for you.
Okay, so there is an element of actually trying both to see which one works. Don't actually rule out the less personalized one if the time isn't worth the payoff. That's really good advice. I think when people think about influencer marketing, they often think straight away about sales, and boosting their brand awareness. So how would an influencer contribute to boosting sales?
Yeah, so another great question. In my mind, it all comes down to what value proposition as a brand you can offer to an influencer. Right? Historically, it's been mostly money, right? Which has some good sides, right? And money is universally accepted, but again, that's a little bit of a dilemma, right? Because on one hand, you want a value proposition that's sufficiently attractive for influencers, but on the other hand, you want something that doesn't completely deteriorate your return on investment opportunity. What I mean by that is, if I reach out to 100 influencers and I offer them 100,000 British pounds, I might have an excellent conversion rate. I also might have the very worst ROI of the history of mankind. So you have to find how to navigate this. And the way, in my mind, to promote sales is to actually have a value proposition that aligns everyone towards the idea of generating sales, right? To really align the interest of both the influencer and the brand. And for that, that's something I mentioned earlier in the conversation. We've seen our clients having a ton of success with affiliate campaigns that are coupon code based. So generating coupon codes that are specifically targeted for an influencer, saying, hey, for each conversion you bring home, I'm going to give you X dollars, so that really you share the risk, but you also share the success. But what I want really to insist on is it has to be win-win to a degree, right? It can't be, me brand, I'm going to mitigate my risk by basically share it with the influencer. Now, if the influencer is successful, it has actually to make some solid money, as opposed to a sponsored post they would have made, I don't know, $100 on or something like that, right? So it's really a way. And when you create that system that's actually win-win, the influencer is a lot more incentivized to push, to produce maybe more content. If he sees, and if there's a transparency, so he can see the conversions that he brings home, he can actually decide to make it a program as opposed to a campaign. So a campaign that would be finished in time, a program would be a much longer opportunity for him and for the brand to generate, conversions all across the year and so on and so forth. So yeah, long story short, it all comes down to how you incentivize the influencer as a brand. And in my experience, in our clients' experience, the idea of having an affiliate marketing campaign that's based on coupon code for sales attribution has worked really, really well.
Awesome. So yesterday I was on Google and I typed in influencer marketing, and something surprised me because the top auto suggest said is dead. What are your thoughts on that, and what do you see as the future of influencer marketing?
So influencer marketing is very much alive. I think it is powered. Well, first of all, look at the trajectory, right? Influencer marketing virtually didn't exist 10 years ago. It's been really ramping up in the recent past. Sorry about the light on my camera. I'm going to
No
try to
worries.
move. So it's been really ramping out in the recent past, and it's supposed to be a $5 billion industry now, growing 32% year over year. So obviously the trajectory doesn't lie; it's going to keep growing. Where people assume that it might be dying one way or another, it's probably because it's been meeting some issues like any sort of growing fast growing industries. So we mentioned fraud earlier on, right? Click fraud or engagement fraud, fake followers, this kind of thing. That's something that the platforms are mitigating as we go. We are creating tools in Upfluence, for example. You can really monitor the fake followers as opposed to real followers. The engaged audience, is it real, is it false, and so on and so forth. So that's something that the platforms, I believe, are progressively doing a good job at mitigating and addressing. But that being said, that's the little things that deteriorate the confidence that people might have in influencer marketing as in general. But it's very much here to stay. Social media is a mega trend. It's gonna last for many years, and influencer marketing is closely related to that. On top of all the psychological fundamentals that it's associated with, right? And the last thing I want to say, the second part of your questions, what's next? I feel very strongly about omni-channel and bringing influencer marketing offline at some point, right? One of the things I mentioned in one of my previous responses was that a way for brands to really stretch their marketing dollars and maximize the use of influencer marketing platforms was to integrate with whatever systems they are already use. And we see that a lot of people could be integrating their influencer marketing platforms with their point of sale system, POS. So, imagine a scenario in which an influencer enters a Costa coffee. I believe you're based in England. He pays for his latte, and we can imagine a way where the point of sale system identifies him as an influencer and would trigger a certain behavior or certain loyalty program to actually bring offline the idea of influencer marketing. And I believe that that's going to be a very exciting time for the next couple of years, and that's something that Upfluence is already working on.
That's interesting. So the future's offline.
Yeah. During COVID, e-commerce has known a boost. When you look at penetration ratios, it's still, not less than half people order online, right? Most of the business is still done online, even in the age of COVID. So it's going to be a long time since, until everything's online. And I believe offline is still a good few years ahead of them. Obviously, not in the next couple of months. In France, they just announced being on lockdown again. I know the situation is not that great in the UK either. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So we'll just finish up. If someone's sitting there thinking, right, I want to look into influencer marketing as my first ever campaign, what is the one piece of advice you would give them to help them with a good campaign?
The one piece of advice. Wow. So
it doesn't have to be the only piece, obviously. There would be more pieces of advice usually, but what's the one thing they should really concentrate on for success?
So I'm going to cheat and say a couple of things. Number one, be extremely data-driven in the data of influencers, but also the way you run your influencer marketing programs, the number of people you reach out to, the performance of your outreach, and so on and so forth, as you go down the funnel until the influencer activation. So being data-driven, advice number one. Advice number two, be as genuine and as authentic as possible. Working with your clients that happen to be influencers is a fantastic way to bring the best of that authenticity, because those are people who already love your brand. They've chosen to purchase one of your products, so they are born ambassadors for whatever you want to do. And yeah, that's my top two pieces of advice. Sorry, I cheated.
No, that's all right. That's fine. I knew it wouldn't be a simple answer as that. Vivien, thank you very much for coming on. That was really useful. And do check out Upfluence. And if you have, and if you want to know anything more about influencer marketing, visit influencermarketinghub.com, and the YouTube channel. There's stacks of advice on there. What's the best social media platform for them to find you on, Vivien?
Me personally, I'm quite active on LinkedIn and Quora. So LinkedIn to share news, Quora just to give my opinion on some questions that the community asks.
Nice.
And happy to connect. Feel free to reach out.
Cool. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ed.